In this video, we will be discussing how to solve radical equations. So if you would go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and complete steps 1 through 5 in your note packet, and then go ahead and push play, and I will go ahead and explain each of these steps. So go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so the very first step when we solve an equation is we want to isolate the radical to one side of the equation. So what that means is we want the radical all by itself. So in problem 1, we can skip step 1 because the radical is all by itself. So if you take a look at, for example, number 3, the radical is not by itself. So in problem 3, we need to get rid of this 4 right here so we can isolate the radical. So that's what step 1 would look like. Step 2, we are going to go ahead and raise each side of the equation to the exponent equal to the index. So the index in this problem, since there is no little number right here, it's a 2. So we are going to go ahead and raise both sides. So we are going to square. So if this was a 3, we would cube both sides. So we're going to go ahead and square both sides. So when we do that, this radical right here is going to essentially not be needed anymore. So the reason for that is if we had the square root of 25, okay, so this is saying what times itself is 25, the answer would be 5. If we go and square that, so remember this is 5, and then we go ahead and square it, we get 25, which would be the answer that's inside here. So a radical and a square, when the index is the same, it will essentially undo it and get you whatever's inside. So again, to repeat that, if I had the square root of 9, the answer is 3. If I go and square that, I would get 9, which is just this. So these two operations here essentially get you what's in the inside. So that is why step 2 works. Step 3, we are going to go ahead and simplify and solve the remainder of the problem. So we're going to be left with x minus 1 equals 5 to the second power is 25. And then we're going to solve this. We don't need a factor. There is no exponent. So we're just going to add 1 to both sides. And we would get x equals 26. Now before we box our answer and say that we're done, we have to do step 5, which is to check our solution. So we are not checking to feel good. We're checking because we have to. Because we know from previous lessons that you cannot have a negative in the radical and the radicand if the index is even. So remember, this little number right here cannot be even if you have a negative inside. Okay, so just to review that, if you had the square root of 9, this is saying what times itself twice, since there's no number here, is 9. So 3 times 3 is 9, so that's why the answer would just be 3. What times itself twice is negative 4? Well, 2 times 2 is 4, and negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4, so it doesn't work. So it would be not a real number. This is saying what times itself 4 times is negative 16. Well, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16, so that doesn't work. And if I make all of these negatives, we would get, again, positive 16. You cannot have a negative inside when the index here is even. But if it is odd, it's okay, because I can do 2 times 2 times 2, right? This would be 4. 4 times 2 is 8. And if I make these all negatives, I would get positive 4 times negative. It would work. So it is okay to have a negative when you have an odd index. So that is why we have to check our answers. So we're going to go ahead and do a check step and plug in for x right here the answer we got. So again, this is not optional. We have to do a check step. And then once it works, then we know our answer is not extraneous. So let's go ahead and try example 2. So the very first step is we want to isolate the radical to one side of the equation, which it already is. It's already isolated. So step 1, we're going to skip. Step 2, we're going to raise each side to an exponent equivalent to the index. So since the index here is 3, we're going to go ahead and cube both sides. So 6 to the third power is 216. And then again, a cube and a cube root. These will undo and leave you with what's just in the inside. We don't need to factor this problem. There is no exponent higher than 1. So we're just going to solve for the variable x. Okay. 2 does not go evenly into 213, so if we want to leave our answer as a fraction, we could leave it like that. If we want to leave it as a decimal, 213 divided by 2, that's 106.5, or if we want to leave it in a fraction, it's also 106 and 1/2. Now, I would say one of these is the better way to write it, because when you plug in a mixed number, you have to change it into an improper anyway. So I would leave it as one of these answers. And then again, we have to check our answer. It's not optional. We have to with radicals and fraction equate, just like last chapter we had to. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the fraction because I see that these will make divide out here. So I like that happens. And then 213 plus 3 is 216. And what times itself 3 times is 216. So I can use my calculator to verify that that's 6. So to do the cube root of 216, I'm going to type in 3, and then the x in the radical key like that, and 216. And I could see that my answer is correct. I get 6. So then I know my answer is right. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at number 3. So the first step is to isolate the radical to one side of the equation. So we want this all alone. So to get rid of the plus 4, we're going to go ahead and subtract 4. And then we are going to step 2. So this is step 1 here. Step 2, we're going to go ahead, since the index here is 2, we're going to go ahead and square both sides. And when we do this, these two undo each other. And we just are left with y minus 3. And negative 2 squared is 4. And then we're going to solve our linear equation here by adding 3 to both sides. And then we get y equals 7. And then we have to do a check step. So we're going to take y minus 3, square root of y minus 3, and then add 4 and see if it equals 2. So we're going to plug in the 7 we got, and 7 minus 3 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And 2 plus 4, it does not work. So that means if this doesn't work, it either means this answer is wrong, so check it, make sure you feel good about it. And if you're like, nope, it comes out to be 7, this means that this is extraneous. So this is not the solution, so I would put no solution. Now, if you just use common sense and think about it, back at this stage here, I knew that this was going to happen because you can't have a radical with an even index equal to a negative number. So at this stage right here, I kind of knew this was already going to happen.